Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MTGO Traders. My name is Terran, and this is Green-Black Constrictor for Rivals of Ixalan Standard. So we thought this deck was dead and buried long ago in the Shadows over Innistrad block, but I think it's back again because of the great cards from Rivals of Ixalan. Especially one key card from Rivals of Ixalan, and that is Jadelight Ranger. But of course, we'll get into the full deck list in just a minute. Before we get into it, make sure to like the video if you like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us know you care and helps keep these videos rolling. But without further ado, let's get into one of the more expensive cards of the actual list here, and that is a 4-of Walking Ballista, an XX00 artifact creature construct. Walking Ballista enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, and you can pay for put a +1/+1 counter on Walking Ballista, and you can remove +1/+1 counters from Walking Ballista. It deals 1 damage to target creature or player. In my testing, I found that Walking Ballista is an amazing card for us, especially in the early to mid game, where if we're playing up against pirates or we're playing up against merfolk, a lot of their creatures only have 1 toughness, and playing out a Walking Ballista with a Winding Constrictor on the battlefield means we have a 2/2, a 3/3, or even a 4/4 to be able to ping down their creatures and shrink their board state. Of course, one of the best uses also for Winding Constrictor is being able to put counters on it as well. If we have a Winding Constrictor or even 2 out on the battlefield, it can even go toe-to-toe with some dinosaurs in the format. And of course, that being said, that is the reason this is one of the more expensive cards in the actual deck list here. Let's move on here to the next card for us. We have 4 Glintsleeve Siphoner. Love this card. I put it in basically every single deck, but I feel like here it's really good as well. This is a 4-of 2-mana 2/1 human rogue with Menace. Whenever Glintsleeve Siphoner attacks or enters the battlefield, you get 1 energy. If you have a Winding Constrictor, you get 2. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, draw a card and you lose 1 life. So Glintsleeve Siphoner on turn 2 coming in against an opponent is fantastic because you normally don't have 2 creatures just yet on turn 2 if we're on the play. On turn 3 attacking in. If we're on the draw, they might have a creature on the battlefield, but again, since this has Menace, we can still get around it thanks to them having to be able to block with 2 creatures instead of 1 on the Glintsleeve Siphoner. So that does mean a turn 4 being able to draw 2 cards for us, and that is always Value Town City, especially with the ability to get 2 extra energy whenever we attack or enter the battlefield thanks to Winding Constrictor. That really helps us out as far as using our Aether Hubs later in the match as well. Glintsleeve Siphoner is just an all-around amazing 2-drop for us. Moving on to some more 2-drops though, we have 4-of Merfolk Branchwalker. This is a card from Ixalan here, a 2-mana 2/1 Merfolk Scout. When Merfolk Branchwalker enters the battlefield, it explores, and of course explore, if you don't know by now, reveal the top card of your library, put that card into your hand if it's a land, otherwise put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, then put that card back or put it into your graveyard. So kind of gives us some options there, but being able to have a 4/3 on turn 2 thanks to a Winding Constrictor in play does make Merfolk Branchwalker a force to be reckoned with and able to kind of go up against a lot of really top-end dinosaurs in the format. But I will say this is probably the weakest card in the entire deck, as it doesn't have a lot of flexibility and a lot of like impact when it enters the battlefield. It's just good because it's just a 4/3 for 2 sometimes. And it does help us as well kind of like curve out or like smooth out our mana curve too. But I do think it does need inclusion here because of the explore mechanic and of course smoothing out the mana curve. And of course next up here we have our Winding Constrictor. Needs to be a 4-of in here. It is a black and green 2/3 snake. If 1 or more counters would be placed on an artifact or creature you control, that many of those counters +1 are placed on that permanent instead. If you would get 1 or more counters, you get that many of those counters +1 instead. So of course that counts for +1/+1 counters and it counts for energy counters as well. And lucky for us, those are the counters we get throughout the deck. Winding Constrictor here is actually very good for us because it does get around a Magma Spray and a Shock, so they do have to Lightning Strike it, Harness Lightning it, things like that, or even just a Fatal Push to it as well. Of course, there are a lot of ways to deal with Winding Constrictor too, but there are not a lot of ways to deal with them as well if you're trying to be very fast on the curve. So against a random red strategy, they're going to have Shocks, they're going to have Magma Sprays, they have Harness Lightnings and Lightning Strikes as well, and they will be using them for the Winding Constrictor because Winding Constrictor can be kind of a like removal magnet, which does mean Winding Constrictor could be dying on turn 3 or 4. That's fine though, the rest of the deck works really well without Winding Constrictor, but with Winding Constrictor on the battlefield, it's just Value Town City. And of course the deck name comes from Winding Constrictor because with Winding Constrictor on the battlefield, it just makes the entire deck very, very powerful. So let's move on from the 2-drops here to 3-drops here. We have Jadelight Ranger here. This is from Rivals of Ixalan, a 3-mana 2/3/4 of here, Merfolk Scout. When Jadelight Ranger enters the battlefield, it explores, then it explores again. So this could give us a possible 6/5 on turn 3 if we have a Winding Constrictor on the battlefield, or even just a 4/3, which is fine. Again, even a 3-mana 4/3 that gives us a land and then gives us a card to put on the top or in the graveyard, that's still very good for just 3 mana. And of course, having the off chance to be able to be a 6/5 on tree attacking in on turn 4 is just devastatingly powerful, and of course can trade with any kind of dinosaur that they can throw at us. And after the Explore trigger kind of goes off, Jadelight Ranger of course can go around shocks, lightning strikes, things like that, thanks to the 3 or 4 or even 5 toughness, thanks to Winding Constrictor. But this was definitely the card that made me want to rebuild Green-Black Constrictor, because Rivals of Ixalan Standard brought this to us, and I think this is a great gift to the Winding Constrictor deck. Moving on to some more 3-drops here, we have Rishkar Pima Renegade. It's a staple in the Constrictor deck. A 3-mana 2/2 2-of here, legendary creature, Elf Druid. When Rishkar Pima Renegade enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 creatures. So of course, when Winding Constrictor is on the battlefield, that's 2 +1/+1 counters on a target creature, which is amazing. And each creature you control with a counter on it has tap, add green mana to your mana pool. So this is great at being able to kind of get out a Verdurous Gearhulk, which is we'll talk about in just a minute, as well as a Planeswalker, which is Vraska Relic Seeker, which is in the deck as well. Overall, Rishkar Pima Renegade is just a utility card for us, being able to kind of ramp a little bit into our bigger spells. Otherwise, it's just a 2/2 for 3 that gives counters, and that's fine. And since we just mentioned the Verdurous Gearhulk, let's move on to it. We have a 3-of 5-mana 4/4 artifact creature construct with Trample. When Verdurous Gearhulk enters the battlefield, distribute 4 +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control. And of course, those are 2 +1/+1 counters if we have a Winding Constrictor on the battlefield. This is basically the card that prompts our opponent to scoop if they do not have an answer to it, or if they don't have naturalize, any kind of artifact removal like a Braid, things like that. But the enter the battlefield ability still goes off even if Verdurous Gearhulk does die, so we still have the ability to put +1/+1 counters on other creatures on our side of the field. So making a Winding Constrictor like a 4/5 and being able to attack out is quite good, and of course you can put more counters on the Constrictor or any other creatures on the battlefield as well. One of the best things though about Verdurous Gearhulk is that it does have Trample, meaning our opponent does have to block it and hopefully kill it, or be able to block it and be able to get a lot of that damage not going towards their life total near the mid to late game of the match. But that is all the creatures in the deck. We have 25 in total. Let's move on to Planeswalkers here. We only have 2 of here, and this is Vraska Relic Seeker. We're in Golgari colors, and it feels really natural to have Vraska in this deck. It is a 6-mana 6 loyalty legendary Planeswalker Vraska. Of course, +2 you can create a 2/2 black pirate creature token with Menace, which is pretty decent in the mid to late game. -3, which is our most important ability here. Destroy target artifact, creature, or enchantment. Create a colorless treasure artifact token with, of course, tap attack it. Add any mana of any color to our mana pool. And of course, -10 is target player's life total becomes 1. Very rarely will we get to a -10 here, but if we do get to ultimate, we do have Walking Ballista to ping our opponent for 1 point of damage, which can close out a match immediately. Otherwise though, we're going to want to bring this card in +2, -3, +2, -3, things like that, to make sure that our opponent is losing board state and we're gaining board state. While that may not be old Liliana or Nissa from their previous standard here, I do think Vraska Relic Seeker is quite good. But let's move on to spells here. We have 3 Blossoming Defense. This is a great protection spell for us. It's a 1-mana instant. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains hexproof until end of turn. So there is a lot, and I mean a lot, of removal right now in the format. And Blossoming Defense helps us, of course, to deal with that as quickly as possible. It can also help us kind of like trade with some hard to deal with dinosaurs as well against that matchup, because I would say that the dinosaur matchup for us is probably the hardest matchup out of all of them, thanks to cards like Carnage Tyrant, as well as the matchup with the Merfolks too, thanks to the hexproof creatures there. But hexproof is really kind of a pain in our side in game 1 that we can correct in game 2. Moving up here though, we have 4 of Fatal Push. It is a 1-mana instant. This is a card that's going to be in standard and in every single deck that has black until rotation. You guys know this. It's an instant. Destroy target creature if it has converted mana cost 2 or less, and of course raid. Destroy that creature if it has converted mana cost 4 or less. Instead, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn. And we have some Evolving Wilds, and of course if a creature dies on our side of the field, that'll trigger the revolt as well. Moving on here, we have 1 of a Heroic Intervention, a 2-mana instant. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This is to kind of help us against Bontu's House Reckoning, Fumigates, and of course Sweltering Suns. This cannot help us against an Hour Devastation, so I would be wary of that. But having a 1 of in game 1 here, I think is quite good. It helps us especially against a more control-heavy deck, especially in game 1. And then of course we have 2 of Vraska's Contempt. This helps us against a Scarab God, a big creature we don't like dealing with. It's a 4-mana instant. So 2 of here, exile target creature or planeswalker, you gain 2 life. So like 2 life gain is actually quite good for us too. Helps us on the curve, helps us kind of gain some momentum back. And of course it exiles target creature or planeswalker, so our opponent can't get them back. And of course that's up against the Chandras, Swords of Defiance in the Round-Up Red strategy, the Scarab God in the control strategy. And if you're against a like lower the ground like Merfolk strategy, you definitely want to grab the Mistbinders. In the Vampire strategy, you definitely want to grab Yahenni, things like that that are hard to deal with, hard to remove. Vraska's Contempt is going to deal with them. But that is all the cards besides the lands here. Let's go over the lands real quick. We have 4 of Aether Hub, so of course we have Winding Constrictor in the deck and Glint Glensleeve Siphoner, so that gives us 1 energy, 2 energy even, or even more thanks to Winding Constrictor. When Aether Hub enters the battlefield as well, we also get 2 energy thanks to Winding Constrictor, so it's very good at being able to tap for green or black mana. Very awesome for us. Next up we have 4 Blooming Marsh here, just a fast land tapping for green and black, very good for us. Then we have 2 Field of Ruin. There are a lot of flip lands right now, and we really want to be able to deal with those lands, or enchantments, whenever they flip into lands, because Adanto, like the first fort, things like that, are hard to deal with, especially for our deck, and we want to have Field of Ruin in here to deal with that, as well as trigger some Revolt for our Fatal Pushes. And next up we have 2 Evolving Wilds. This is again just here to trigger Revolt and help us kind of get into some extra mana if we need to, especially because we need some extra green mana thanks to the Jadelight Rangers, and if we need to get into an extra black mana for the Vraska's Contempts, Evolving Wilds is here to help us do that as well. And of course, moving on, we have 6 Forest and 5 Swamp, and that is the full 60 on game 1. Game 1 game plan, of course, is to turn 1, hold up a Fatal Push, turn 2, do a Winding Constrictor, or get into a Glensleeve Siphoner, things like that. Then turn 3, either get into a Winding Constrictor or Jadelight Ranger. If we have a Winding Constrictor on the battlefield, we want to ramp as quickly as we possibly can, and then attack out as quickly as we can as well. What can we do in the game 2 sideboard? What can we do against control? What can we do against another aggro strategy? Let's go to the sideboard here. We have a 3 of Duress. You know it's good against a control deck, and we have a 3 of in here. It's a 1 mana sorcery. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land card from it. That player discards that card. And of course, this is really good against a control strategy. This is really good against an approach strategy, especially if they have an approach in their opening hand. This is really going to help just get rid of that and kind of minimize their chances of getting approach before we get the kill. Next up here, we have 2 Naturalize. This is the cons art. I don't think the actual Rivals of Ixalan art is out just yet as far as high res on Scryfall, but this is the cons art here, and it's in standard, I promise. It's a 2 mana instant, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Great card for us, very fantastic. Good at being able to deal with the Path of Metals, the Legion's Landing, things like that that are in standard at the moment. Naturalize helps us deal with artifacts and of course enchantments for just 2 mana at instant speed. Next up here we have 2 Trespasser's Curse. I keep running up against the Hidden Stockpile and token-based strategy decks, and I think Trespasser's Curse here is especially good against those decks because it gains us 1 life and loses them 1 life as well, just 2 mana, and that's awesome. They'll definitely want to burn a Ixalan's Binding or a Cast Out on this card as quickly as possible because it does gain us a ton of value. Next up here we have 3 Trial of Ambition. Remember when I was talking about in game 1 how we're kind of bad against hexproof? Trial of Ambition kind of helps us get around that, especially against a Scarab God, getting around Enrage triggers, and of course getting around things like Carnage Tyrant and those hexproof creatures that are the merfolks in their deck. While we don't have any cartouches to kind of bounce the Trial of Ambitions, just being a 2 mana kind of sacrifice opponent's creature spell is fine in the sideboard and better in game 2. Keeping in step with the removal play here, we have 2 Walk the Plank. This is a great card against anything but merfolk. It's just a 2 mana sorcery, destroy target non-merfolk creature, and that's it. Very simple, very straightforward, and good to bring in against dinosaurs, good to bring in against pirates, and very good against the Round Up Red strategy as well. Of course, the only caveat here is that it is double black, so it is kind of difficult to get into unless we get into a Evolving Wilds or of course our dual lands quickly. And the last 3 in the sideboard here for us is a Deathgorge Scavenger. There are a lot of strategies right now like the Selesnya decks, the Round Up Red decks, and of course the Godfar's Gift decks where they have eternalized creatures going to the graveyard coming back as 4/4s. We really don't want that to happen, so Deathgorge Scavenger is going to come in here. Even if it dies when it enters the battlefield, we still get 1 trigger so we can at least exile 1 card from their battlefield, hopefully slowing down their meta. Against the Godfar's Gift strategy, this is going to grab a Godfar's Gift from the graveyard. Against a Selesnya strategy, it's probably going to grab a Resilient Kenra or an Adorned Pouncer, and against like the Round Up Red strategy, it's going to grab the Earthshaker Kenra, things like that. But it's a 3 mana 3/2 dinosaur. Whenever Deathgorge Scavenger enters the battlefield or attacks, you may exile target card from a graveyard. If a creature card is exiled this way, you gain 2 life. If a non-creature card is exiled this way, Deathgorge Scavenger gets +1/+1 until end of turn. More often than not, we're probably going to exile the creature and gain 2 life, except of course against that Godfar's Gift strategy where we want to exile Godfar's Gift instead. Getting Deathgorge Scavenger to be a 4/3 for the turn. But that is the full 75, guys. On MTGO Traders, it's coming to about 168 tickets. This is kind of a more top-end, I would say, deck for us for standard. Still not like ridiculous numbers for me, but in paper, it is kind of expensive at $241, which does make this kind of a significant investment. Of course, that's because of Walking Ballista, Glensleeve Siphoner, Vraska Relic Seeker, and Blooming Marsh. Those are the kind of the top cards in the deck. Oh, and Jadelight Ranger as well from Rivals of Ixalan. That's kind of in high demand. However, I think Jadelight Ranger will probably go down a little bit as Rivals hype kind of goes down in the next couple weeks. I think Jadelight Ranger will drop in price. I think right now it's just kind of a weird spike. But overall, I love our game 1 game plan, and our game 2 game plan is pretty decent against a lot of different strategies in the format. But that is it, guys, for the deck. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Would love to hear what you think. Would love to hear if you have any suggestions for it. I know Merfolk Branchwalker was the card I kind of like teetered on taking out and putting in something else. I'm not sure what would replace it just yet. Definitely would think about that for sure. I think Jadebearer might have been good if you wanted to go towards a like straight up just green-black Merfolk deck. I think that was interesting. But I do think from a competitive level, this type of build is a little bit better than the green-black Merfolk build. But that's it for the video, guys. Like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to the channel. I love you, and I will see you in the next video.